Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that honestly completely shifted my perspective on how our minds actually interact with modern algorithms. We're going to explore the literal science of reclaiming your focus and taking back your mental autonomy. Look, if you've ever felt like your attention span is just shrinking, or like your thoughts are being subtly directed by the feeds you're constantly scrolling through, you're absolutely not alone. We're going to look right under the hood at the neurobiology of what's actually happening in your head, and way more importantly, how to break free.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand what's happening, we need to look at this chilling but incredibly accurate observation from Dr. Julian West. He says, algorithms are essentially cults of one that radicalize your perception. Just let that sink in for a second, right? We usually think of radicalization as this thing that happens in extreme political fringe groups, but the truly unsettling reality here? Our own mental apertures are being actively, deliberately narrowed every single day. The algorithms feeding us content are basically isolating us in these custom-built, perfectly tailored echo chambers.
You see, there's a massive, massive gap between the illusion of what we're doing and the biological reality. The illusion? You think you're simply relaxing, swiping, passively watching some videos after a long day. But the reality is wild. Your brain is quite literally being farmed. These digital systems aren't just serving you entertainment. No, they've been engineered to understand your internal expectations and your desires better than you understand them yourself. It's crazy. They keep you in this state of perpetual pursuit, actively draining your cognitive resources, all while you're sitting there thinking you're just winding down.
Section 1. The Engine. The Science of the Trap. So, for millions of years, our brains were highly optimized to forage for survival. We are biologically hardwired to seek out information, resources, novelty, literally with the exact same drive as a bee flying from flower to flower looking for nectar. And the fuel for that foraging drive? It's dopamine. Now, for decades, pop science told us dopamine was just the pleasure chemical, right? Like a little reward you get at the end of a task. But modern neuroscience tells a very different story. It shows us dopamine is way more sophisticated. It actually functions as a temporal difference reinforcement learning algorithm. I know, big words. But what that basically means is dopamine is a highly sensitive tracker. It doesn't just fire when you get a reward. It maps every single microstep of a journey, constantly calculating the delta, the difference between what you expected to happen and what actually happened.
Let's see how this builds across just a fraction of a second. Imagine your brain as this ultra-fast, super-powered mobile computer. In millisecond 1, an expectation is set. Bam, you see a thumbnail on your screen. Millisecond 2, you take the action, you click or you swipe. And by millisecond 3, reality encounters your expectation. Did the content actually deliver that hit of novelty you craved? See, your dopamine system is constantly updating these expectations of success. It's tweaking your behavior in real time based on whether reality fell short, met, or totally exceeded that split-second prediction.
Now, what's really interesting about this whole concept is how modern platforms have totally weaponized these exact microsteps. Industry insiders have essentially figured out how to hijack our ancient foraging drive. They use sneaky mechanics like losses disguised as wins, which is basically giving you just enough stimulation to feel like you're succeeding while actually keeping you hungry for more. They use the infinite scroll to strip away any natural stopping cues. Literally every time you swipe, they're updating your expectations just enough to keep you playing their game, which just deepens those mental trenches of your habits.
And this constant frictionless feeding of our expectations, it leads directly to what researchers call ideological capture. When an algorithm consistently shows you content that perfectly matches what you already believe, it's constantly validating your internal model of the world. And the danger here is huge. You stop receiving contrary signals. You lose the friction of reality. And those opposing viewpoints, that friction, it is absolutely vital to keep your thinking flexible, accurate, and, truly your own.
Section 2. The Countermeasures. 4 Escape Protocols.
So, how do we get out? We can break this capture by intentionally injecting what scientists call developmental noise into our daily routines. Protocol 1 is physical distancing and supermax constraints. Research actually clearly shows that simply having your phone in the same room, even if it's face down, even if it's on silent, it actively lowers your cognitive performance. Because your brain is still expending background energy, suppressing the urge to forage. To combat this, you need extreme constraints for periods of deep work. A great anecdotal example of this is using one of those prison-style lock boxes for your devices. You literally lock the phone away to create an absolutely non-negotiable period of presence.
So the crucial point here is the number 30. 30 seconds. If you introduce just 30 seconds of physical friction between you and your device, like actually having to walk to another room and unlock a physical box, the habit will almost always curtail itself. And why does that work? Because the physical effort required to go retrieve the device now heavily exceeds the immediate dopamine expectation your brain was calculating. It's brilliant. You break the entire temporal difference loop simply by adding a tiny bit of physical friction.
Moving on to Protocol 2, selective foraging. This is all about realizing the heavy truth that almost every single thought you have is downstream of what you consume. Your inputs literally dictate your outputs. So when you choose who to follow or what channel to watch, you are quite literally choosing your future thoughts. Because the stakes are really that high, you have to take active, deliberate control over the digital food you're foraging for, rather than just letting some algorithm spoon-feed it to you.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can proactively break our own biases. While an echo chamber just pats you on the back and validates your existing internal models, intentionally exposing yourself to diverse inputs forces your brain to wander and work. One totally amazing way to do this now is through AI-assisted debate. Here's how it works. You take a hot-button issue, regardless of where you personally stand on the political spectrum, and you force yourself to argue the opposite side. You actually instruct the AI to debate you. This forces a full 360-degree view of the problem, and it absolutely shatters ideological capture by actively introducing those vital contrary signals we talked about.
Now, Protocol 3 requires us to really slow down. It's the practice of wordlessness and boring breaks. Think about what most of us do when we take a quote-unquote break from work. We immediately pull out our phones and start scrolling. But biologically speaking, that is not a break. That constant pulse of algorithmic arousal is actually exhausting for your nervous system. You're still foraging. You're just foraging in a totally different digital field. To genuinely rest, you've got to follow a few simple steps. First, put the phone completely away, like out of sight. Second, take a walk in total silence, or just sit and practice 5 minutes of focused breathing. Third, consciously shift your mental state from thinking and doing into a state of simply being and feeling. This complete lack of external stimulation is what actually allows your nervous system to fully reset, and it helps your brain consolidate everything you've actually learned that day.
Now, a quick heads up, when you first try this, you are probably going to feel highly agitated. Dr. Julian West coined a phrase for this that I found absolutely fascinating. He calls it the lactate of the mind. Think about it. Just like your muscles burn with lactic acid during a tough physical workout, your brain produces this chemical agitation when you suddenly cut off the flow of digital dopamine. But that agitation, it's actually a brilliant signal. It means your brain is entering a high plasticity edit mode. So lean into that boredom. It literally means the rewiring is working.
Finally, we reach Protocol 4, the complexification of relationships. Look, algorithms naturally thrive on and optimize for polarization. They flatten complex human beings into these one-dimensional avatars just to make us angry, because, well, anger drives engagement. The ultimate real-world antidote to this digital dehumanization is to complexify our relationships in our actual physical lives.
The science of communication tells us that if you really want to have a healthy discussion on a divisive topic, you have to anchor it first in shared identity. You have to find common ground before the debate even begins. Are you both parents? Do you both love the same city or the same sports team? By establishing that shared identity up front, you keep the brain's social and empathic circuits open. This prevents the exact kind of radicalization that algorithms push, and it allows you to genuinely listen to contrary opinions without your brain feeling biologically threatened.
We've covered a ton today, from the neurobiology of the foraging brain to the exact science-backed protocols to escape its capture. But I really want to leave you with one final provocative thought to reflect on as you go about your day. If it's biologically true that every thought you have is downstream of the information you consume, then who is actually choosing your future? Is it you, or is it an algorithm? The tools to take back control are right there in your hands. Thank you so much for exploring this with me, and I will catch you in the next explainer.